And now it's with great excitement that I introduce our first keynote to kick off the 2015 conference. Joseph Gordon-Levitt being interviewed by veteran television executive Brian Graden.
It's time to hit record.
Starting Friday, June 12th.
Regular Joe here. Ladies and gentlemen, Season 2, Hit Record on TV. We won an Emmy, for God's sake. If you have seen the show, then you already know this, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. We all make the show
together.
Each episode revolves around a theme.
We're shooting a booty jam about moms.
Exactly. So Season 2 is really different than Season 1. There's a lot more singers, people playing instruments, a lot more visuals. You can always count on some feast for the eyes. I get to collaborate with
Hundreds of thousands of artists.
Annie Hathaway, Zac Efron, Mindy Kaling, Ben Schwartz.
Are you serious?
She's hilarious. I absolutely think it's really different than any other show on TV. If you've never seen Hit Record on TV, check it out.
With Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Friday, June 12th on Pivot.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very, very much for the opportunity to be here. Really looking forward to it, and thanks to Steve for the introduction. I'm really just thrilled that you guys will get to spend some time with this guy, Mr. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I have found to be extraordinarily thoughtful on a freakishly wide range of subjects, professional and personal. So I think this will be great. I first met Joe in 2012 because he had this revolutionary idea for a variety show, the one you just saw, that would be authored not by Hollywood, but by thousands of artists working collaboratively from around the world, Hit Record on TV. And in preparing for today, so many of you said to me the future of marketing comes down to those exact same themes: content, collaboration, and community. So Joe, I could theorize that in 2005, when you founded Hit Record, perhaps you were trying to invent the future of media. But I also happen to know, and this surprised me at the time when I found out, that you started Hit Record in part because you couldn't find a job.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was, well, like you said, it was in 2005, I had just finished working on Third Rock from the Sun, and I quit for a while, and I went to college, and then I wanted to start acting again, and I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't get a job. And it really hurt very deeply because, you know, when you're an actor, it's difficult. You have to kind of wait for someone to give you permission and hire you, and then you can play the role, and then you get to be creative. But without that, you're kind of at a loss. And I came to the conclusion that this was unacceptable, that I had to take responsibility for my own ability to express myself and be creative. And Hit Record was just this little turn of phrase, this kind of pun, a pun on hit record. To hit the record button, the round red circle to me became this symbol that my whole life others had been pushing the button. Others would roll the camera and I would just act, but I wanted to be the one to push the button. And so I was making little short videos and writing stories and making songs, and my brother helped me set up this little website that we called HITRECORD.org. And that's how it started. It was as simple as that. And where it started turning into what you're talking about of this community and this collaborative process was just this little website. We had a message board on there, and a very small, a smattering, a few hundred people or something would come to the message board and talk about, the little videos I made or whatever. But we realized that the natural tendency was not to just talk about the videos I made, but instead to make things together.
Sure.
On the smallest scale. And so we started doing that, and then it grew from there, and it happened over years. My brother and I kind of built the website further up to kind of try to facilitate that kind of collaboration. Before spending any money, before it was legal, we would totally just rip off any, Bob Dylan song or whatever from a CD and use it on a video. We weren't thinking about it as a company for years. And then my friend Jared, who's out here, and I started talking about, well, how could we take what's going on here and make kind of professional scale productions? And that's when we figured out, okay, we have to kind of craft our own terms of service and figure out, how the intellectual property laws will work. How could we pay people if we're going to be making money, through this collaborative process? How can we pay people? And we figured all that out. And it was in 2010 that we launched it as a website where we could do it like this. And now, 5 years later, we met you and we made a TV show.
I have to say, when we started working on season 1 of the TV show, and I may not have told you this, but there was a part of me that was very nervous because I didn't know if we would get one contribution from my mother somewhere in Illinois, or if we would get 130,000 contributions, which we ultimately did for 2 seasons. But you were far more confident, and I think for a room full of people who are working daily to try to inspire people to collaborate with their content, what did you discover were sort of the secrets to focusing people's creative energies, as well as getting them to actually deliver what you needed?
Yeah. Well, the reason I think I had confidence was because we'd been doing it already. I don't think we could have just kind of starting from square one said, oh, I have an idea, let's make a variety show where we'll start a website and hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world will contribute. There'd be no way they would have showed up. But because it had been, by that point, growing slowly for 8 years, there was a very gradual development and an organic one. I think that's a big part of why people feel good contributing to our site is it doesn't, it's certainly no offense, but it doesn't feel like a marketing campaign,
Right.
and it's not.
Right.
If it did feel like that, it would probably be harder to get them to contribute.
I think one of our secret weapons were request videos, because Joe would actually make videos in the character of Regular Joe,
right,
and motivate people to participate. But why did you call yourself Regular Joe in those videos?
Regular Joe, that was, Regular Joe was, a username that I started after the site had been going for a few years. Before that, my username on the site was just Joe. And I started calling it Regular Joe. It was another pun. And one of them is just to be like, oh yeah, I'm like a regular Joe. And, but then the other meanings had to do with regular meaning kind of the rules, like the regulations, because I tend to think that a creative process benefits from rules. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe something to take away, that if you just say to a community full of people, hey, make something, and you don't put any limits on it, you don't put any rules on it, they're just staring at a blank page and it's really hard to do anything. Whereas if you say, the rules are, you have to start every sentence with the letter A, or just some kind of limit, some kind of rule can really get you started. And so that was one of the words of regular. And then the other meaning of regular was to do it regularly, consistently, on a regular basis. And we started making videos that we called the regularity. And I think that's definitely a big part of what makes a community thrive is when there's a regularity to it. Right. If you just kind of do something and then go away and then try to start it up again next time you want to do something, that doesn't feel organic, and it's not somewhere that people can settle and something that people can identify with. Right. But if it's regularly going, then it becomes like a place to kind of hang your hat.
Well, you also gave every episode a theme, which I really thought helped people know, make something about the dark, yes, fire, etc. A prompt,
yeah. We call them challenges sometimes. Like sometimes the challenges won't lead anywhere. They'll just be like the weekly writing challenge, and it's nothing for any kind of TV show or whatever. It's just, there's a new prompt every week, and the point is just to write for fun. But again, if you just sit down and say to somebody, write for fun, that's really difficult. Whereas if you give them a challenge, there's something,
Yeah.
And then we also will have challenges for like, okay, we're making this segment of television. This person has contributed this. We think we want to take it in this direction. So the challenge is, how can you rewrite this? Or how can you, take this character and illustrate it? Or how can you take these illustrations and animate it? Or, these are the kinds of challenges that facilitate the production of our show.
Yeah, I've always found that creative people, they want you to tell them where the lanes are, and then leave them alone to be free within the lanes, but just tell me where to play, and I'll play in that sandbox.
Yeah, that's well said. Mm-hmm.
I also remember there was a moment where Joe said, don't mistake this for a democracy. Yeah. This is, in fact, what did you call it?
Yeah, a benevolent dictatorship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And why was that?
Well, my thinking there is kind of how, it's how a movie set works. I grew up working on movie sets or television sets, and on a movie set, there's a director, and that director works with lots of collaborators. The director couldn't make the movie alone, and all the collaborators have to bring their own ingenuity and unique perspective, and a good director is good at inspiring that from the collaborators, but a good director also has to have the forethought and the vision to say, like, okay, cool, I'm gonna take all of these collaborations, but focus it into something that's got an individual purpose and voice. And that's, I think, the best directors that I've worked with find that balance, how to be spontaneous and be collaborative and really open it up, and then at the same time stick to their guns and know how to put the limits so that the finished movie can have its individuality.
Right. Well, it actually does raise an interesting question, because if you're making a film like Don John, directing that, you're working with 25-year Hollywood professionals, lighting designers, costume designers, et cetera. On Hit Record, we were very often working with people with no credits from their bedroom in Ohio or Finland. And how do you compare the two experiences, having lived them?
Well, you know, some of the professionals act like children, and some of them act like professionals. And some of the kids in Ohio or Finland that you're talking about act like children, and some of them act like professionals. I've found it really runs the gamut, and it really comes down to the individual. And that's also maybe one thing, if I'm trying to kind of scrape together any kernels of wisdom of my experience of what it's like to work with an online community, is don't think of them as a crowd. The whole term crowdsource, I think, is a little damaging, and frankly kind of invented by engineers with Asperger's. Like, you can't think of people as a crowd. Right. They're not a crowd. They're all individual people, and that's actually the strength. And certainly there are sort of crowdsourced projects you could point to in the world of tech where it's just a numbers game. But when it comes to the making of our show, it's really not a numbers game. Right. It's about finding the individual contributions that come from individual human beings that are excellent.
Well, in sifting through 130,000 contributions, we actually came to rely on certain people in the community who proved over time they had really good taste and became sort of an extension of our staff and your sensibility.
That's the thing. And the notion that a computer can go through all that, I think, is bullshit. I think, frankly, Netflix is lying when they say that they have an algorithm that can recommend you good movies. I don't find that when I'm gonna like fucking build a blacklist for myself against Netflix. I watch Netflix. I pay $7 a month. But when I look through and it's recommending things to me, I don't find that it's necessarily so great at it. The way we try to do it is not based on a computer algorithm. Right. The way we try to do it is based on a network of human beings. And you trust the taste of a person, and that person trusts the tastes of their people, and those people trust the tastes of their people. And through all of those filtrations, we end up finding the things that resonate with the benevolent dictator who's directing the show.
This actually might be a good time to show you guys what one of the finished collaborations looked like when it actually aired on television. If you want to set up the First Stars clip.
Sure. So this is a short film that we made that it sort of exemplifies how we make things. The prompt, the challenge was to come up with a story about first times, because the theme of the episode was the number one. Because it was our first episode. It was our pilot last year. And so we asked the community to either write stories or just talk into their camera and tell stories about something having to do with first times. And to me, this really gets at the strength of how we're doing it. If you hired a room full of Hollywood screenwriters, they never would have come up with this. But this young woman contributed a story about the first time she ever saw the stars when she was 16 years old. And how that had happened was she grew up with an eye condition such that she couldn't see the stars. And then her dad, when she was 16, had the brilliant idea to buy her a pair of night vision goggles that he got out of a Russian military surplus catalog. And she wrote this whole story and had so much detail, and it was this beautiful father-daughter story. And we adapted it into a short film. And the production was all made collaboratively. We shot actors in front of green screen and then put that green screen footage up on our site so that illustrators could all individually kind of contribute graphical elements that all get animated together. So you'll see every little thing on here was made by tons of different individual people. The score, done the same way, all these different instruments. How many television shows have real violinists playing, you know, on their score? But we do, and we're not going to take the time to play the whole short film. We're just going to play the first little bit of it.
Let's hit.
When I was 16, I saw the Milky Way for the first time. I was 6 months old when I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. I'm lucky. The type that I have is not the most vicious or devastating. It means that I'm night blind, that my peripheral vision is slowly narrowing into a pinhole, and that my depth perception is gradually flattening away to nothing. My cousins and I used to go out and lie on sleeping bags in the back of a pickup truck and watch meteor showers. They would watch, I would stare up into the black sky and study the 7 bright points of light that I could see and wonder what it was like. Then my dad. My father ordered a pair of Russian night vision goggles from a military surplus catalogue. He said he wanted to watch his sprinklers at night and make sure they didn't get plugged by debris in the irrigation water. But he also knew what a gift it would be for me.
So it goes from there. But yeah, thank you.
And you can watch the rest of it online. It has a beautiful ending. There were 105 individual contributions that went into that 3-minute short film. And I find people are still surprised when they learn that all 105 of those people are actually paid, probably because the financial and legal frameworks are still evolving in this arena. But I know it was very important to you, both as an artist and a human being, to figure out how to pay and how to credit people. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe you could share how you solve for that.
Sure. Well, the way that we've done it, as when we were a much smaller company and just doing little like publishing projects and stuff like that, our way for paying people was that every time we had a production that made money, we would take the profits and split them in half, and half the profits would go back into our company, and the other half of the profits would go to all the different contributing artists. And when figuring out which of those contributing artists got how much, we tried to figure out a formula and realized there is no formula for this. We have to just kind of go one at a time and really assess it. And that's what we do, and that's what we still do, actually. We go one person at a time and figure out, you know, that little illustration that they did, what percentage of the short film does that account for? And we put those proposals on our site and say, here's what we propose are the profit splits. What do you guys think? And we give the community a chance to give feedback on those proposals. Then we'll make adjustments, and then we make the final call. And we're upfront about how that's going to be the process. Doing a television show has been different, though, because television shows don't go into profit right away. They take usually years. You would know better than I. But they take usually years to turn any profits, and I didn't want to wait years to maybe pay people. And so what we did was we earmarked a pretty significant chunk of our episodic budget, $50,000 for each budget, to pay the contributing artists. And that's how we did it. And that is something that I think is also just important in general, that as we move forward into sort of, whether you want to call it crowdsourcing or open collaboration or whatever you want to call it, when you're opening up this process and allowing people to come through the internet and contribute to something that's going to make money, you should pay the people. That's, I think, crucial. And
I thought the notion of transparency was fascinating, because imagine if you're at your office, they posted everybody's proposed salary, and then you got to debate it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But somehow on Hit Record it actually works.
Yeah.
And I also find that a lot of hit recorders will post pictures of themselves with their check, almost as a badge of honor, that I think is as important as the money itself.
It's really true, and because the thing was never motivated by money, and no one's, I don't think, really coming to our community trying to like get rich, but it's really moving when you see it, and it happens a lot where people will post photos or videos of themselves with their check saying, this is the first time I've ever been paid for something I did, and I showed my parents this, and it's really means something to me, and that means something to me that this company can provide that opportunity for people.
There's a Walt Disney quote that I know you reference a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know if Walt Disney ever really said it, but I like the idea that he did. But I like the quote regardless. And the quote is, we don't make movies to make money, we make money to make more movies. And that's kind of how we've always approached HITRECORD being a for-profit company. Is we have all these goals, we have all these aspirations. Those aspirations will cost money, so we have to make money. And so let's be lucrative.
Speaking of money, I know after ProMax every year when I was at MTV, the team would usually return, and they would say the theme this year was that brands want deeper and deeper integration into your content. And miraculously, that seemed to be the theme every year from ProMax for about 15 years running. And I would sometimes have mixed thoughts about that, where you blur the lines between art and commerce. And I know HITRECORD has taken sponsorships, Levi's, Sony, et cetera, but have also been very selective. And I wondered how you think about which sponsorships are appropriate for a community of artists, and which ones would you pass on completely?
Yeah. Well, we kind of immediately passed on, oil companies and like things like that. But then the ones we chose, just ones that felt like it made sense. Like Sony made a ton of sense because I use Sony cameras. And we did one with Samsung, and they showed us their camera, and I was like, man, this is really good. I'm excited to send these cameras out to our community, and that's great. If they're gonna support us doing this, great. And with Levi's, they had a history of supporting artists and wanting to associate their brand name with, Shepard Fairey or LCD Sound System. Lots of great artists who were like, great. If you want to give us money and help us pay this community of artists to make things, I often wear Levi's anyway. Why the hell not?
And did that actually create opportunities, I don't know the answer to this, for some of the artists to get paid as well as a part of these projects and sponsorships?
Oh, that's been a very important part of how we've been able to keep our doors open and pay the community, for sure.
Here's another thing that we experienced together related to marketing, and I was speaking to the head of one of the networks in advance of today, and she said, extra content is marketing gold. I can't do anything if I don't have extra content. And I was wondering if you're in the final stages of editing Don John, which I know is intense, or you're about to deliver 8 episodes of HITRECORD, and you get that phone call that says, I need 37 pieces of extra content by next Wednesday to market this show. How do you think about that?
Wow. Well, they're two very different things, right? With Don John, that would have been really difficult because we didn't have anything extra. We just shot what needed to be in the movie. But with HITRECORD, there's tons of stuff because people are constantly making things, making different versions of things, remixing things that end up in the show. I mean, there's so much great stuff on the show. We can only put, a fraction of it into our half-hour episodes. So there's tons of stuff that we can make extra content with, and really the whole site is that. Is just a big, the more time you spend on the site, the more you might just find all sorts of things that I haven't found yet.
I know one of the key takeaways for me is that marketing often comes in at the end of the process, but if marketing can be in the beginning of the process and give that license to creative people, I think everything changes, frankly.
Yeah, I really like to think, and this goes for the show and for the movies too, there tends to be this kind of divide between, well, there's the art and then there's the marketing. And I always find that a little funny because the marketing is the first thing that the audience sees.
That's right.
So when they sit down to watch your movie or your show or whatever, when we're writing our movies, we're like, what's the first shot? It's going to make a really big, important impression on the whole experience that the audience has with this movie. But the first image they really see is the marketing.
That is a
and
great
they're
point.
going to sit down and receive whatever your movie is through the lens of the notions that they've built up from the marketing. So it really is part of the art to me, I think.
Right. This was a question, actually, that probably more of you were curious about than any other. We're living in a day, unlike, say, 10 years ago, where you can talk directly to 4 million followers whenever you want, and that was invaluable to the marketing of HITRECORD. But we're also living in a time when you could indiscriminately say anything that popped into your head if you wanted to. And I know that you don't. And I wondered, how do you and how should we think about creating an actual quality conversation through these new media?
Wow, that's a really good question. I guess for us, it's sort of about having a purpose, and this maybe goes against what's really the most popular on social media, because I actually feel like the most popular Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and stuff is when famous people are sort of breaking down those barriers and saying, hey, I don't need a private life. I'm just going to, put my whole private life up on social media, and I don't want to do that just because I don't want to. But I find that people get excited when you're not just selling them something, and your only purpose isn't just to try to make money, but your purpose is something other than that, something meaningful to, when I have something that means something to me.
Right.
Maybe that's a kernel that, like, it really does have to do with an individual. Like we have, for example, my Twitter account is called HITRECORD Joe, and then we have the HITRECORD account. Well, obviously, way more people subscribe to the HITRECORD Joe account than the HITRECORD account, and because people connect with people.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, that's, I guess that sounds obvious, but that's, I think, a big part of why HITRECORD has been successful in doing these kind of collaborative processes. Is it's not like, we are Mountain Dew and we want you to design our new can, because there's no human being there. Mountain Dew isn't a human being, so people aren't as interested in contributing to Mountain Dew's collaborative effort.
Well, if I took away one thing from everything I read in advance of today, it seems that finding a way to be authentic as Mountain Dew or Joe, whomever you are, seems to be the absolute key to using new media, et cetera. Last question, I'll sort of finish where we started, which is you've managed to build communities and engagement, which I know is a top priority for many people here. And I read something that said it really isn't about talking to the audience anymore, it's about getting them to talk to you. And that's something I think that HITRECORD has done beautifully. So for all of us, any final sort of thoughts or takeaways today?
I guess I would maybe say, I would just add on to what you just said. If it's, what it has to be is not only me talking to an audience or an audience talking to me, it has to be an interchange. And if all you're gonna do is be like, hey, give us your content, we're not giving you anything. This isn't a conversation. It doesn't feel like a conversation. To me, I really think that media is going to become something more like a conversation, because that's really the history of human communication. Is not people sitting on a couch and just listening for hours every night. I don't know how really natural that is. That's been sort of imposed on us just by virtue of the way the technology works for the last 100 years or so. But in older times, people would gather around and tell stories at the tavern or around the fire on the savannah, and it wasn't just, it's not like everyone gathered around the fire at the savannah was all just sitting there listening while one person told a story. I don't imagine that's probably what happened. It was probably lots of people all kind of pitching in, and yeah, someone might kind of take the mic, so to speak, and tell a part of the story, but someone else would be like, no, that's not how it happened. Don't you remember? Blah, 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 blah. And then someone else would be like, oh, I heard that blah, 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 blah. And that's how stories get told. That's how human communication, I think, is naturally it naturally happens. And what's cool is that our technology is finally facilitating that again.
Right.
Whereas, you know, the technology of broadcast of television or movies or radio doesn't facilitate that.
Right.
New internet technology does. And in fact, I think at this point, the technology is sort of ahead of the culture.
Right.
Because we, as just our culture, we're used to being consumers of the media more than being participants.
I know your parents, who are lovely, as well as your brother Dan, who co-founded the site with you, had a collaborative worldview that very much informs, I think, everything you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my parents are, you know, lefties, I guess you could say, or you know, the kind of people who believe that it's good to, you know, it's good to have everybody have, rather than just a few haves and many have-nots and that kind of thing. And the truth about broadcast media is it's a very stratified system where there's a few haves, you could say, of, you know, a sort of exclusive clique of a media industry who makes everything. And then everyone else in the world has to just kind of sit and watch it. And I'm not sure that that's really the healthiest thing for us as a human race.
Right.
And I'm really excited to be alive right now, where the technology is facilitating a new way for media to work. And it's sort of us as the human beings, though. The technology can't do it alone. It's sort of on us, the human beings, to figure out how to use that technology in a way that really is conversant and allows more and more people to participate.
That seems like a great place to end it. Thank you, Joe, very
Thanks,
much. Thanks
Brian.
all of you guys. Have a fantastic ProMax. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.